My name is Darryl. I won't tell you my second name. I'm hoping that my anonymity can be kept to a degree. But I feel for some reason I have to show my face. Show my face along with the story I have to tell. Something happened 3 months ago. You know, they say that time is a great healer, but I'm not convinced. I feel like time is predatory and it's catching up with me. So 3 months ago, I was a surgeon at a hospital on the south side of Glasgow in Scotland. I've been working there for a number of years, had a fairly good, solid career path ahead of me, knew where I was going, had a nice house, money in my bank account. Things were well for me. And all I had to do was fix people. That was it. Just fix people. Sometimes they could be fixed, sometimes they couldn't. But you tried. There was a time when I was younger when I had horrid thoughts and anger. Life wasn't about fixing people back then. It was about, I don't know, revenge, venting. I look back now and I can say, oh, that wasn't me, but it was me, and that person's still inside. I can feel it. And as time goes on, I can almost feel it coming back. I don't expect you to understand or anyone else to understand. I'm not saying this to be understood. I'm telling this story because I just need to be heard by you. So while I was working as a surgeon 3 months ago, we were carrying out a fairly normal procedure. It's called a cardiac catheterization. It involves it was a woman in her 40s, and she didn't even need to go under general anaesthetic for it. We take it's like a small catheter essentially that goes up through a blood vessel in the groin, goes up to the heart, and we can then look at the blood flow within the heart once we inject certain dyes into the system, and we can see if there's any blood vessel blockages or anything like that. So this woman had been complaining of breathlessness, and so that's what the procedure was there for. It was just to find out if she had some major blockages in her blood vessels. The procedure normally takes about 30 minutes. And even just an hour or two afterwards, they're fine to go home because they're not under general anaesthetic for it. It's just a local. So I was in the operating room with two of my colleagues, Michelle, who was there on hand to help with the anaesthetics, and Edward was there to assist me. And so we carried out the procedure. About 15 minutes in, something strange happened. I saw a look in the patient's face. It was like a stony gaze, just a blank slate. She'd gone from kind of talking away to us to just looking at something up above. Just looking. It was as if myself, Michelle, Edward, we didn't exist anymore. We weren't in that room. There was nothing in that room but what the patient could see. And I saw then a sort of flicker of fear in her eyes as she looked up at the ceiling. And then the strangest thing, her expression changed again. And it was almost for a second as if she was unrecognisable. The face was confused. It was a confused look. So the patient then started talking again, and Michelle, Edward and I were just looking at each other in absolute disbelief, because the woman's voice, it had changed. It had changed into that of an old woman's. I could hear it, that sort of raspiness at the back. And she started asking questions about where she was, and then she looked directly at Michelle, the anaesthesiologist, and said she recognised her, she knew her. She told Michelle that she was her old aunt who had passed away a decade previous, and that Michelle needed to go and get seen by a doctor, a great irony there with her being a medical professional, because she had a lump on her breast and she had been ignoring it, and if she didn't get it seen to, she would die of cancer. Michelle just started breaking down into tears, and she said that she knew the voice implicitly at that point was that of her dead aunt. And she said, yeah, she'd found a lump on her left breast, and she had just been living in a daze about it for weeks, hoping that it was just a gland and it needed to go away. But she knew, and she should have known as a medical professional, that you can't mess around with these things. You need to go and get it seen to. It might have been benign, but Michelle knew after being told by that voice that it wasn't. So we just stood there in disbelief in the middle of this procedure. And by this point, the catheter had reached the heart. And I didn't really know what to do at that point. Then I saw a flicker again in the patient's face, and I looked up again at the ceiling, and that same little flicker of fear came over her, and then this blank slate, and then suddenly a new expression, different from before. And she opened her mouth, and out came the voice of an old man. And at that point, my colleague Edward, he just gasped. And I just remember him saying, "It's my dad. It's my dad." The voice, the patient, claimed to be Edward's father, and told him that he had to stop the affair he was having, because he knew that he really truly loved his wife, but that if he didn't stop the affair with this other woman, that Edward's wife would find out about it and she would commit suicide. I remember Edward's response. He just went quiet, and then just like he was all choked up. He just said, "I will, I'll end it." And then the face of the patient, it just went blank again. And then she looked up once more at something up in the ceiling, and this time she started to cry. She started to get upset at something that she was seeing, and her expression changed, and then she just looked straight at me, as if there was nothing else in that room but me. And she opened her mouth and started to talk. And it was the voice of a young girl, 8 or 9 years old. And I stood in horror as I listened to that voice, as it started to describe something that had happened. Something from long, long ago, when I felt different about the world. And the girl started talking about a day where she was playing out in the street with her friends, and how I came along and took her hand. And we walked to a little piece of woodland nearby. And I could see Michelle looking at me and Edward looking at me, and at that point I just moved the catheter as much as I could, severing what was inside the heart, and the patient started bleeding out. And within a minute of convulsing and coughing up blood, the patient died. And she stopped talking. And I was struck off, of course. But better that than anyone ever finding out about what I did many years ago with that little girl.